Um, Gender and sexuality, right? The Combahee River Collective Statement is a really early. Early is probably the wrong term, but it came out of that same time period, right, following the civil rights movement at the tail end, and it was a expression of Black feminism, as opposed to second wave feminism that was popular before this, which was very much pigeonholed into more white feminist issues. And so that there's a like we said, we'll put all the slide up with links and stuff. But that was kind of one of those foundational moments, right? One of those foundational statements that kind of kicked off the whole new thing, right? So that's a really key thing to learn, read to understand that intersectionality of gender and race. The Tyranny of Structurelessness by Joe Freeman isn't about gender or sexuality. It's about the movement, right? It's about the feminist movement, and it should be required reading for every green. It's like to the point that I'm like, every meeting you should read this before you start doing anything else, right? To keep it in your mind, because as she's talking about exactly what we are striving for in the Green Party, which is a bottom-up, non-hierarchical movement and organization. And she's raising, decades ago, the problems that she's running into this within the feminist movement, right? And things like the unspoken rules that come if you don't have rules, right? The de facto leaders that come if you don't have elections, and then the fact that without elections, without processes, you don't have any way to remove a de facto leader, right? It's just such an important thing for us to read, to kind of think about our organizing and whether we are organizing ourselves towards structurelessness and not decentralization. You want to jump in on that one, Garrett? Because I know.
Yeah. This is a very, it comes from a very real concern, right? From these movements that many different movements have encountered it, and the Green Party itself has been kind of grappling with this ever since the beginning. With we're trying to be anti-hierarchical, and so we don't want to be authoritarian. We don't want to push things from the top down. We don't want to force our will on people. We imagine this whole or not just imagine, we're trying to embody our principles of grassroots democracy and building consensus and just being anti-hierarchical in general. But a problem that surfaces so often is that if you're so worried about being hierarchical that you don't want to set any rules, you don't want to set any structure, because you're afraid that any type of structure is going to be hierarchical. Any type of structure is going to be too top down or something like that. That instead of having a formal structure that supports democracy, you end up with an informal structure that is hierarchical and authoritarian, that makes decisions behind the scenes informally. The few people that know each other do a phone call in the back room to solve this, because there's no structure that enables the community to come together and solve it. So it's a very important lesson to learn that we obviously want to be very anti-hierarchical, but decentralization does not mean disorganization. We have to be, if anything, extra organized with a really well understood structure that anyone can participate in, that we take a lot of effort to make sure everyone can participate and that they have the ability to participate. If there's any structural barriers to prevent them from participating, we fix that, because we have to have that structure to create the type of democratic participatory, grassroots sort of society that we want. Otherwise, it falls into this informal hierarchy of people that feel like they have to make decisions for others, and then get kind of comfortable being in those positions and saying, well, that's, we've always done it this way. This is how we do it. Even though there's never been a rule. No one's ever agreed to do it that way, except for the couple of informal leaders who decided it. But now they think that's the rule. And we see this in local Green parties, all the way up through the national Green Party. So it's an important thing that we have to make sure that we're conscious of, and building the correct structure that is going to support our vision for democracy.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it before, right? But we don't just want to read the thinkers, and the thoughts about these different points of intersection, but we also want to read the analysis and the critique of the movements, right, and of the projects and the attempts and the strategies and all that kind of stuff. And that's where the tyranny of structurelessness rises itself to what I would consider a quintessential piece for Greens. There's a great book called Queering Anarchism that's from AK Press, that examines the intersections and interactions and commonalities between radical queer politics and anarchist politics. I read it about a decade ago, and it was a really important book for me when I read it, because it was really, really interesting to see someone taking these two different movements, but showing the ways they work in parallel, showing the ways that they're natural allies, showing how they these two particular movements and strains of thought were able to naturally get along and help each other politically. Bell Hooks, who recently died, but Where We Stand, Class Matters is an essential piece from Bell Hooks. But really, read it all, right? Bell Hooks is not Kant. Bell Hooks is not Hegel. Bell Hooks was not producing 700-page tomes. Bell Hooks was a poet, and Bell Hooks almost always writes in a very short and digestible manner. So read it all, and like we'd said, with the intersectionality thing, Bell Hooks gets into feminism, Bell Hooks gets into class, Bell Hooks gets into being a person of color, but it gets into all of it. So it's a great piece. Thinking Through: Essays on Feminism, Marxism, and Anti-Racism, by Himani Banjari. Another, it's right there in the title, right? The intersectionality is right there in the title. But centering feminist Marxism and how it interacts with anti-racism. And there are definitely, the movement, there are definitely times that we need to make sure we're doing that kind of centering, right? That we're not getting our blinders up, and not to keep harping on the second wave feminists, right? But after the second wave, this was needed, right? There needed to be thoughts that were, there needed to be authors pushing and movements pushing a diverse feminism, a diverse radical feminism. And then things like Gender Trouble by Judith Butler are just foundational pieces, kind of like the Comedy River statement.